This is really interesting, Greg. It's sort of like the biggest unexpected collapse of the political season so far. You'll recall he won a massive victory for re-election as governor of Florida in last November. Florida has a lot of Democratic constituencies. He won by a thumping 20 points. He was going to be the non-Trump Trump. Who could take his message, but without the baggage, the chaos, the narcissism, and go forward. But since he's fallen 20 points in the polls since January, he has raised money. It's big money from some big supporters, but the grassroots small dollar contributors are not really there. He's staffed up big, but now it's a top-heavy organization and funds aren't flowing in fast enough and he's had to do some layoffs. But most importantly, he just hasn't connected with his voters. They listen to him. He talks about Florida a lot, but he doesn't talk about Iowa a lot or New Hampshire a lot. And he just seems to be top-heavy with a message that's not cutting through to reach Trump voters and get them to switch.
And I might ask you about what can be done to reset that at what fairly might be described as the early stages of a campaign, critically though they are. But just on the way to getting to that question, I see, Bruce, that Politico has also been suggesting Rupert Murdoch might be cooling somewhat on the idea of a DeSantis Republican nomination. Does that still matter, though?
It does matter because so many Republican voters still do look at Fox News. Murdoch has kind of washed his hands of Trump after the insurrection on January 6th and the defeat in that November's election in 2020. He was very warm to DeSantis last year. DeSantis had like 30 interviews on Fox News during 2022. But now Murdoch likes winners. And right now he's not sure that DeSantis has what it takes. So the thing to watch, though, Greg, will be Iowa. It's some months away now. It'll be in January 15th. He's staking everything on Iowa. Retail campaigning, evangelical audience. He has the support tacitly of the governor, Kim Reynolds, very popular. And if he can win Iowa, then he can sort of rock Trump back on his heels. But right now, he's trailing.
All right, so what about a reset strategy then? I guess as one barometer of panic, I was drawn by a reference in one of the news articles to him looking to flesh out policy ideas. Now, call me sceptical, Bruce, but that seems unconventional with 16 months to go. Is that the best way for a reset? What do you do to put it back on the rails?
He has to show that he has a coherent program. But the key thing is he talks in almost algorithms. He has initial names for every social program that he has, like DSG and ERC and this, that, and the other. People don't know what he's talking about. He has to reach them as far as their values are concerned and show why he is a winner. And he is a winner in Florida. He needs to translate that. But he also needs to take Trump back and just say, you're not the one to take the party into the future. I am in my 40s, in my prime, doing terrifically well in Florida, and you should, and let's see what we can do together to build an even stronger Republican Party. I'll just remind you of this, Greg. Joe Biden in 2020 lost Iowa, lost New Hampshire. That's January, February. And 1 month later, he was the Democratic nominee. So there is plenty of time to reset, break through, and prevail. But right now, people are not enthusiastic about his campaign.
Yeah, fair enough. Good historical analogy there. Now, in the meantime, Donald Trump and his supporters seem presumptuous, to say the least, about them prevailing. So much so that there are more and more reports on something I know you've been keeping an eye on for some time, Bruce, and these are plans to radically centralise power in the president's hands in the event of a second Trump term. How sweeping do you think the designs for these changes might be?
They would be unprecedented in scope. Greg, we're in a situation where we're unprecedented in the amount of unprecedented mentions that we make of Donald Trump. What he wants to do, first he wants vengeance on his enemies, and we've discussed this before. He wants to come back and really go after and punish those who have prevented him, A, from winning, and secondly, from doing everything he wanted to do in the first term. And he's learned a lot of lessons. And if you read Peter Baker and Susan Glasser from the New York Times in their book, or Phil Rucker and Carol Leonnig and their book, read Jonathan Swan from Axios last year. He has plans to take over the federal bureaucracy, loyalty oaths for public servants, and also as far as the independent agencies, the Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Trade Commission. They would no longer be independent under a Trump presidency. He wants to bring them back into the executive branch. They're in the executive branch, but he wants control over them in the executive branch. And thirdly, on money. He wants the power that was banned after Richard Nixon tried it. So this goes back 50 years. He wants the power, if Congress says spend this money on foreign policy, spend this money on this base in Alabama, he wants the ability as president to decide where all the money goes. It's called impoundment. And so these powers taken together would create the most powerful chief executive in the history of the country, but he'll use it for extremely political ends, what he wants to achieve in a second term.
And they'd be constitutional? Would they pass the current court?
No, given precedents, but you know, there's a whole raft of Trump judges that are now scattered throughout the judiciary and certainly on the Supreme Court. And Congress, it is Congress that has the power of the purse, as it's known. And Congress appropriates the money. They take it very seriously as to where it goes and why. For Trump to override that as president, here in Australia, the Prime Minister is part of the Parliament. The executive is sort of equal with the executive is subordinate to the Parliament. In the U.S., it's three coordinate, separate branches of government. The president is not more powerful than Congress. So for the president to arrogate to himself the power of appropriation, the power of the purse, that would truly be unprecedented, and we'd be entering very dangerous political territory.
We'll keep across that in future discussions. One quick one, lest we be accused of focusing too much on the Republican side. Bruce, the Democratic outlier, Robert Kennedy Jr., is copping some flack, the latest bout being around racism and anti-Semitism accusations. Is it fair to say that Democrat rivals might be seeking to bring him down a notch?
Oh, I think a lot of Democratic rivals would like to bring him down a notch. It is, it'll be 70 years this November, Greg, since the murder of President John F. Kennedy. And the Kennedy name has a lot of resonance and a lot of power, very powerful. And of course, Robert Kennedy Jr., he's the son of Bobby Kennedy, the Attorney General, the president's brother. His cousin, Caroline Kennedy, is the ambassador, U.S. ambassador in Canberra. And Kennedy is certainly trading on his father's name. When he attacks, when he says that coronavirus is targeted at Caucasians and black people, but not targeted at Chinese and Jews, these are really racial tropes that he's throwing out, and it's galling. It is just so offensive. In the normal political world, in the Democratic Party, just be run off the stage. But he's running sort of a semi-independent, and he could get 5 to 10% of the Democratic vote by virtue of that name. So he is creating quite a bit of unsettled, dystopic chaos inside the Democratic Party with these lies that he propagates about vaccines, coronavirus, and what happens. It's just a very sad but dangerous situation.